Welcome to a special edition of the Andy Staples Show presented by Sling. Big game over. Ari Wasserman, Georgia just stomped Tennessee 27-13. If you didn't watch the game, might sound a little close. It was never close. It was never a competition. You said at the end when Tennessee punched in that touchdown that was a big talking point for podcasters and all that. I don't know. I watched that game. Felt pretty much like a demolition to me.
It was, yeah. It just will be interesting at the end of the road when we forget about watching the game in 4 weeks and there's a discussion who the fourth team is going to be. You're going to hear a lot of, well, that was only a 14-point loss. Because you know what I will say, Andy? I thought Tennessee did a tremendous job of corralling Georgia's offense, too, defensively. And it was a stomping. I'm not trying to act like it wasn't, but
no, Tennessee didn't corral Georgia's offense. Tennessee not scoring kept Georgia's offense moving at a leisurely pace. Georgia could have scored 45 points in this game if it had needed to.
But if I would have told you before the game, Georgia scores 27 points, who wins? You would have said Tennessee 1,000 times out of 1,000. So, and game flows obviously change.
Did not expect Georgia to completely shut down Tennessee's offense, which they did. And
so you think that this game completely eliminates Tennessee from the playoff discussion?
No, because we don't know what's going to happen down the road. We don't know who's going to lose to who.
It's going to be great for college football podcasters and discourse.
Yeah, if they're sitting there 11-1, then there's a maybe, but we'll have to see what happens. We can definitely stop with the 2019 LSU comparisons. I said they could prove it this game. They did not. Georgia had all the answers.
Now, well, I do feel like the 19s. Go ahead.
Here's the other question. If Tennessee's receivers can't get open against Georgia's DBs, can Alabama's?
Absolutely not.
It's not Jameson Williams and John Mechie this year.
Yeah. I was surprised that Tennessee literally couldn't score.
I mean, they couldn't get open, and what they exposed was Hendon Hooker, the way that offense works. He's not reading the whole field. And Gary pointed out during the game, like there was a blitz where Hooker had a guy wide open down the field, but he wasn't even looking that way. Yeah. And, if you can cover their receivers for a little bit and go after him, you can get to him. But teams have had so much problem with that. They've either not been able to cover them at all, or he's been able to slip a rusher, but Georgia was all over him. John Day in the chat says Ari saw this coming. No, Ari didn't. Ari let himself get talked into picking Tennessee. Stick to your guns, Ari.
Yeah, I should have stuck to my guns. But it is a reminder, too. I feel like the 1972 Dolphins right now. It's like there's no team that ranks number 19 in the composite rankings winning the national title this year. And every year that it goes on, it's just like there is a boogeyman at the end of the road at all times. And I think that as fans of the sport, because we are reporters, but we enjoy watching them, so that means that we're into it. We want to talk ourselves into the idea that there could be a Cinderella or a team that comes out of nowhere and actually shock the world and accomplish the stuff. And it's like, you know what? No, Georgia's going to be waiting for you. Alabama in other years is going to be waiting for you. There is no shortcut to the CFP. Tennessee was an awesome story. Their season was a tremendous success this year. I don't think that any Vols fan should be hanging their heads right now about the way that this went. The fact of the matter is that you don't erase the deficit of what the program was in comparison to Georgia coming into the year in 6 weeks or a year, especially when you lose all that talent in the portal. And no matter how good Tennessee's offense has been all year, the fact that they beat Alabama helped trick us into this. You saw a team that was basically playing against a junior NFL team out there. Every single person on Georgia is a dog. The top 60 receiver that caught that touchdown pass in the back of the end zone, who has not really been a part of Georgia's plans the last few years, looked like Calvin Johnson. It's like these guys are everywhere at all times, and you can't beat them because you're having a nice magical season. So, I think that this is a good thing for Tennessee as they try to sell, in the NIL era. Hey, we can look what Neyland Stadium can look like the night that we beat Alabama. Look what we can sell as a program. Look who we are when we're very good. But, the thought process of having discussions about whether this was a legitimate national championship contender or a team that was going to make the playoff, I think we're premature based on what we know about this sport and the fact that we kind of ignored it. And I'm most guilty of it because I'm the one who's always preaching it,
Well, but as you said, it still might be a team that can make the playoff. I'll throw a scenario at you. What if for number 4 and number 5, it's 11-1 Tennessee and 12-1 Pac-12 champ Oregon?
Yeah, no, that would, I mean, if the only 2 options for the 4 seed in a year where there's so many options, like that really went from look at all the teams in the top 10 who are 7-0 to your only options are 2 teams that got their doors blown off. I think that I would give it to Tennessee in that scenario because Tennessee played Georgia on the road. Their game was closer and they have a win over Alabama. Like, I don't think that it's much of a discussion if it's down to those 2. Now, I don't know if it will be down to those 2. Now, the question is,
you're talking me back into that, but yeah, this is
Oregon doesn't go over Tennessee. That's bull. There's no way. Side by side comparisons, you're Mr. SEC.
But Ari, they might be a conference champ.
Yeah, the conference championship thing can go down. Yeah, that's not the way it works.
I know. I just.
And they have a common opponent.
The playoffs should just be conference champs. No, it shouldn't.
No, Tennessee got its butts kicked. What happened to Oregon was just a complete. It was demoralizing. It was like, should this program exist still? Like during that game,
but it felt. So, I will say, Georgia Tennessee felt like that for a lot of the time. Well, before you ask me that, let me ask you this: Chris Callahan in the chat. Undefeated TCU versus Tennessee. Who gets in? TCU.
Undefeated
13-0 TCU is getting into the playoffs.
Undefeated conference champion gets in over. I don't care how many. Yeah, it's not a discussion. Now the question I have for you is: there are other teams here. It's like I don't know what would have to happen in college football if the debate at the end of the year was just those 2 teams you mentioned, Oregon and Tennessee. Mm-hmm. What happened to the loser of the Michigan game? What happened to TCU? What happened to Clemson? There's a lot of other I can sit here right now, and maybe this will be a clip that Old Takes Exposed uses, but I don't think either of those teams, both of those teams, in my opinion, when you are a blowout loss recipient, is no longer a candidate for the playoff. It's been that way since the beginning of time, and there are scenarios,
and I realize
this
is 14 points, but if you watch the game, and here's the thing about this game versus the Georgia-Oregon game, everybody watched every play of this game. Everybody was watching this game. It was on the main TV in every house.
I was looking forward to this game all week, like it was Christmas Day for me, and I was bored as hell watching it because there was never even a glimmer of hope for Tennessee to win the game. It was just so abundantly clear early on. When I think I knew they were going to lose is when
they picked up the fumble. I thought they might have a chance, but then when they had to kick a field goal, I was like, "Uh-oh, this might be
when he
bad."
missed Hendon Hooker, the second they went up 14-3, like right when that non-safety happened, which by the way, I have no idea how they didn't call that a safety. The guy's entire body was laying into the end zone.
Georgia was playing the refs, it felt like, because remember Tennessee got that face mask right there on 4th and 29 or whatever that got him a first down, and then Georgia's like, we'll just stop you again on downs.
Yeah. But I do think that it's just like a realization that as we continue to talk about who can win the national title, that really it is a small number of teams, and I don't want to do the dancing recruiting. Everyone knows where I stand, but like, everybody in the country watched every single play of this game, right, Andy?
I don't know if they watched every single play.
Did you see the monsters out there?
They might have turned it off at 24-6. But yes,
they're monsters.
Georgia is correct. And I was trying to explain this to somebody on a radio show based in New York that I went on Friday. Just because it's not the same people and these guys are slightly less experienced does not mean these guys are not athletically as good. Now, there's probably not a Jordan Davis. Like, there's not one of him. But I would argue there was no Malachi Starks on last year's defense either. Yeah.
Also, too,
they're just a different kind of monster.
A team that is moderately worse than the Georgia team that won the national championship last year is probably still the best team in America in 80% of other years, especially in a year in which we have questions
this year.
Yeah. And honestly, like, as I look at what Ohio State did on Saturday and they're continued to discuss the grab ass that goes on in those games. I think Clemson, which starts any minute now, the more I look at this game, the more I think that Notre Dame's going to win right now, just based on the way the line is.
It's the same weather, and I will give you this because you pointed it out on the pick show that we recorded Thursday with Nicole. You said the weather in Evanston is going to be a factor. You were absolutely right because it's extreme wind, does weird things. You're talking about we're talking about 30 and 40 mile an hour winds, and it's the same storm that hit Evanston is hitting South Bend. So
yeah, and like to me though, the wind was a factor, but it wasn't the reason why Ohio State played like crap. And like the thing about playing a close game, it's not the same thing as playing like you don't care. You know, like if you look at their body language, this is something that I talk about on the show all the time. I don't see it at Alabama. I don't see it at Georgia very often, even in the Mizzou game. You got Ohio State players with their hands on their hips, looking down at the ground, you know, lackadaisically looking up into the sky. And it's like they don't even want to be there. And like I don't know if that's a thing to come later on. And when they start playing Michigan and Alabama and those teams later on, you know, you don't have that problem because you're playing in a big stakes atmosphere. But like there's something inherently off with that team, and I can't really put my finger on it right now. Alabama's fractured. Clemson isn't. You know how I feel about Clemson. Like Georgia is likely going to win the national championship again because I don't look at a team right now that can line up with that squad and go 60 minutes with them, play for play, and beat them with those animals out there. Well, Ohio State has those animals, and Alabama does, but Georgia is so good.
But you know the differences between Georgia last year and Georgia this year, other than we mentioned some special defensive players are not there, so maybe they're just a tick below. But they're better on offense. Better. Yeah, they are better on offense in a lot of ways. And Georgia could have scored a lot more points than they did. They didn't need to. They could have scored 45 points in that game had they needed to. And I think that's the thing. I look at these other teams they're going to have to play. Now, Ohio State, from a talent standpoint, will be better than Tennessee. Alabama, from a talent standpoint, is better than Tennessee on defense, but we've seen Alabama get 52 hung on them.
Dude, this is just setting up for the same ending to the movie.
Oh, I know. Alabama beats them in the SEC championship game.
Yeah. And then Georgia goes, and then it's like did we watch this already? You know, Michigan, I think, is probably like if I had to pick the game right now, I think Michigan would beat Ohio State. So it's like you kind of are having a very similar year to last year after the way it started, and it's kind of discouraging. But like, do you think that Alabama can beat Georgia again?
I'm going to say no. And then, of course, that clip will be in the Alabama hype video when they beat Georgia in the SEC championship game. And then they'll lose to Georgia in the playoff.
Because the other team still has Will Anderson and Bryce Young and Nick Saban on their side. It's like you can't just blatantly dismiss the likelihood or the chance that could happen. Of course that can happen.
I won't. I will not blatantly dismiss it. But
it does happen, and when it does happen, Georgia will still get in. Ohio State might be the other team. Michigan might be the other team. And then you can have your Tennessee, Oregon debate or whoever else is in it. And then the national title game is going to be two SEC teams again.
If it's Georgia, Alabama, and obviously Alabama is playing LSU right now, and the winner of this game probably will win the West. But if it's Georgia, Alabama in the SEC championship game, I'm probably going to pick Georgia. Georgia's probably going to be favored by, what do we think, 4 points?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. I may be wrong, but I do think Georgia's the better team, just like it did going to the SEC championship game last year.
Yeah, and Bryce Young literally won the Heisman because of that game, because it was such a remarkable outcome. You know, so listen, there's a lot of analysis that goes into this. There's a lot of discussion and a lot of thought about who can win it. And it's always fun to have these podcasts throughout the year, this heartwarming stories. But at the end of the road,
Bryce Young just threw a pick in the end zone, by the way.
He did?
Mm-hmm.
Are we done here?
Boy. Oh, boy.
Andy, but that was, I thought like I could just like relax a little bit now because they're not going to have any teams outside of the top 15 winning the national championship. But let me ask you this before we get out of here.
Yeah.
Does this help you believe, like Tennessee fans are distraught right now for obvious reasons, but does it help you believe in Tennessee's build anymore? Like, do you think Tennessee could be a legit, is this like a flash of the pan type thing? Or are they like,
no, because they can recruit at that level. They're not that far below. You said they're number 19 in the recruiting rankings. To get into the blue chip ratio, so to get 50%,
19 to 4 or 5 would be like me walking to Gainesville.
I know, but what I'm saying is they can get into the top 10.
Yeah, if they get to the top 10, and even then, they still, they could probably get to the top 10 in a year.
Chance. And you got a fighting chance if you have a quarterback at that point. And then if you keep
because winning, it was the lines, right? Wasn't it the lines today that really?
Oh yeah,
that was it right there. Like they got
Georgia's offensive and
physically
defensive line
dominated.
And Georgia philosophically did not they changed philosophies. They heated up Hendon Hooker. They have not been blitzing people as much as this. They've not been trying to sack people.
You can have all these conversations about how creative Tennessee's, motions are to get people open and how brilliant they are offensively. It's like, football is a very complicated sport, but it's also a very easy sport. If you get your ass kicked on the lines, you're not going to win. I don't care if you've got the guy from A Beautiful Mind drawing up your plays. It's not going to work. So like that, and that's what happened. So like even at the end there when they were driving, and I think it was a 2-score game at that time, and they had the ball in plus territory. And then it was, the drive where it ended like on 4th and 28 or something, and they just kept sacking them on every play. It's like, what do you think is happening here? This isn't coaching.
That was where they got the face mask on the third consecutive sack.
But still,
and then they still turned them over on downs.
Yeah, is this coaching or is this just athletes?
I'd say that was athletes. Well, no, that's also coaching because again, Georgia had not been a big sack team all year. But now we know it wasn't because they couldn't be. It was because they were choosing not to be.
Yeah.
They were saying, we can cover, so we're going to rush these 4, and we're going to be cool with that. They were heating up Hendon Hooker, and he couldn't handle it. He's not been pressured like that.
So who's the Heisman Trophy favorite now?
That is a great question.
After the showing that Stroud had today.
CJ Stroud didn't look good. Hendon Hooker didn't look good. Can I tell you who I think it probably ought to be?
Right now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously
Drake
subject
May.
to change.
Drake May might be the best quarterback in the country. Now, Bo Nix is going to get a lot of run for it. I think Stetson Bennett, Brock Bowers, we need to talk about them too.
Yeah. It's going to be a very interesting straw poll this week.
I think so too. I think we're going to see a lot of Bo Nix love and a lot of Drake May love, but I would not be shocked if we see Stetson Bennett bumping up into there. He's been in there in that straw poll a few times already this year, earlier in the season, after Oregon and South Carolina. I wouldn't be shocked if we see him in there. Now, my question to you is this, because you know how I feel, where I said I made the mistake in 2020 of voting for Kyle Trask on Florida's offense when really it was probably Kyle Pitts. Is it Bowers or is it Bennett? I can hear arguments for either one.
Well, the thing that is not fair is there are certain quarterbacks that get to exist in the race by default because their team is very good, right?
Right.
Like I think at times, even C.J. Stroud last year, C.J. Stroud is an amazing quarterback. He will likely be, in my opinion, the number 1 pick in the draft. I don't want what I'm saying to be misconstrued as me saying C.J. Stroud's not amazing. He is. He also has benefited greatly from being the quarterback at Ohio State, correct? So if that's the case,
yes,
I think it's very interesting that Stetson Bennett has not really reaped the benefits of being the quarterback at Georgia. And I wonder if it's the former walk-on thing or whatever.
In the chat says, Trip Tepper says Bennett's stats are pedestrian. No, they're not. The efficiency numbers are off the charts. Just because you're not asked to throw 70 times a game doesn't mean you don't have good stats. Look a little deeper than total yards.
Well, I do think, too, that, and I don't know about you, but I've always kind of felt like I was, a voter that paid more attention. I think a lot of the Heisman voters just look at the statistics and go, well, he had more touchdown passes, so he's definitely it. And it's like, I hope that we are starting to evolve into a voter pool that is more consistent in their thinking and that look deeper. Like, who was actually the most important player? Who scored 5 touchdowns against a group of 5 team? And who it's not just about how many touchdowns.
This is why I argue for Drake May, because he's literally the most important player because their defense is usually so bad that he has no other choice.
Yeah. So, I mean,
and he had to do that again on Saturday against Virginia.
Listen, if CJ Stroud beats Michigan, I think that's all it takes for them to win the Heisman. I think it's his trophy to lose at this point. I bet you.
Well, Max Duggan, we should mention Max Duggan, who look, they fell behind. That if you look at the final score of the TCU Texas Tech game, you're like, oh, that was a blowout. No, it was not. That was a very close game. Texas Tech had to go for it on 4th down there a couple times at the end, and it set up some easy TCU scores. But that was a nice performance by Max Duggan and company in a tough game. But yeah, Bo Nix he's putting up big numbers too. I would bet Bo Nix winds up in New York. I don't know if he wins it, but I bet he winds up in New York.
I wouldn't have hurt you. Wouldn't have predicted you saying that 2 weeks ago, but here we are.
Nope. Oh, Trip. Bennett's stats are still pedestrian. No, they're not. I'm just telling you.
Now go pay Elon $8.
Are you gonna pay the $8? I don't know if I'm gonna pay the $8.
I'm not. No.
I think I just switched to Instagram and just post beefcake pictures the whole time.
Yeah, I don't really know about the direction Twitter's headed in. I haven't really been paying much attention to it, but if everybody has a check mark, then what's the point of paying for it?
No, I'm not gonna pay for it. I don't care if I have a check mark or not.
Yeah, I don't either. I just
a bunch of fake Andy Staples running around breaking.
But I just don't want there to be a fake Ari Wasserman who's posting things that could get me
stars
fired.
Don't matter.
Thinking it's me. Yeah, like
well, as long as your boss doesn't think it's you, it does. It's all good.
Well, I know, but like it's going to be an interesting world out there. But I guess that's a conversation for another day.
It is. Now join us again when all these night games are over, because this is we got Alabama, LSU, we got Notre Dame, Clemson, we got some fun stuff tonight.
I'm telling you, Clemson's on upset watch, pal. I'm telling you.
We will be back to break it all down, including the game we just talked about, all the other games from the early period today. We got a big post-game show tonight. We'll talk to you then.